Welcome to training camp. Hopefully you guys had some fun last week, worked on your golf game and the bowling alley and everything like that. But excited to get started here for training camp. It's always a great opportunity for all of us, players, staff, coaches, everybody involved. I know there's a lot of time and a lot of effort that's gone into actually setting up training camp by our staff. These bleachers just don't go up, by themselves. So a lot of people put a lot of time, a lot of effort in kind of getting ready for training camp, so certainly appreciative of their efforts and what they've done to get to this point. From a team standpoint, I mean, look, this is what football is all about. We've got to start somewhere, so this is where we kind of start to build a foundation, try to find out about our team. All of us have to reestablish our level of performance, and that's what training camp is about. So we're going to take it one day at a time, kind of embrace what's in front of us. Nothing's guaranteed. I would say personally, it's certainly an honor and a privilege to be in the NFL. I've had the good fortune being in here for a period of time, my 23rd training camp. So you never take anything for granted. None of us are guaranteed anything. So it's certainly a privilege and an honor to be here. Getting older, probably a little bit older than maybe people think I am, but it's always good to get started here with training camp and kind of get ready to go and see what we can kind of put together here for the 2023 season. So just a couple quick transactional items here as we go. There's a handful of players that we put on PUP yesterday. I'm sure there might be a question or two about that. I would just say that the big thing with that, probably have about 3 or 4 players. It's really more short-term, more precautionary than anything else. I would expect them to be kind of ready to go here kind of Sunday, Monday. Some of this is just their natural progression relative to what they've done through the spring and through the summer. Some of it's probably, again, like I said, more precautionary than anything else. So I would anticipate, 3 or 4 of those players kind of being ready to go here kind of Sunday. And I think this morning some of the reports came out regarding Titus. I would just say, I'm not necessarily going to comment about, the contract and everything that went into that. I would just say Titus has been a good player for the last number of years. He's a good kid. He works his ass off. He's tough. He's competitive. So, those discussions, some of them come together. Some take a little bit more time than others, but it was good working with his team and his representation, try to get to an end point. Titus loves being here, wants to be in Houston for a long period of time. And I would just say, just overall, we certainly put some resources into the offensive line here over the last, I would say, a year or two. But the expectation is that comes with performance. So I'd say, now the hard work starts. So, but Titus has earned it. So there's some final things that we're working through. So I don't want to necessarily comment as if it's finalized, but expect by the end of the day to have that resolved in some way, shape, or form. But just wanted to kind of hit that here before we got started. So with that, we'll take some questions. We'll start. John, you got a question, or is he? He's not in the crowd yet. So, well, Brooks, go ahead. If John's not ready, then we'll start with Brooks. Christy, yeah, go ahead.
With John Metchie, what do you expect from him at training camp? And do you, right now, I know it's early, but do you expect him to play in week 1?
Yeah, I don't think we're close to week 1 with anybody, but he's clear to participate here in training camp. I think, Christy, there'll be some players where we kind of manage them maybe during the course of practice or how we practice, but John's ready to go. I know he had a little bit of a setback there in the spring, but he's cleared. He's ready to practice. So kind of take it one day at a time. I'm sure he's anxious and excited, to be back out on the field. So I don't think anybody's really ready for week 1. So hopefully we can just kind of get through this today and get through this week of training camp and then kind of get ready to go. It's interesting, really. 20 practices and 3 preseason games before we play Baltimore. That's what's in front of us. So I think the important thing for all of our players is to maximize their opportunities each day, whatever those entail, however many reps you get. And kind of get yourself mentally and physically ready to go for what's going to be a pretty long season here.
You know how hard he worked. What does it mean to you to be able to see him back on the field after everything's gone through?
Yeah, look, it just speaks to John's, I'd say, mental and physical toughness. The way he's wired, I'd say he's a pretty unique person. There's not many people like John Metchie in this world. Not many, I would say, athletes that have had to endure some of the things that he's had to go through. But it speaks to his perseverance, his stick-to-itiveness, what he's made of, the people around him. I'd say our medical staff has invested a lot of time and energy, and he's appreciative of that, and that relationship is reciprocal and been beneficial for both parties. So excited about John, excited about all of our players really get out there and kind of get started.
Titus, your day before training camp, just the timing of that, what was the importance of kind of getting that done now? And you've worked into the season, I think, before
Yeah, really, like we've talked about, Brooks, we never put a timetable on anything. So, those discussions, they take on a life of their own. So some take a little bit longer. We say, we've had pretty open dialogue and communication, with their camp all throughout the spring and all throughout the course of the summer. So whenever you reach an agreement or resolution, whatever the timing is on it, today, tomorrow, a week after, there'll be some players, I'm sure at some point, that we talk about. We've been pretty flexible and adaptable relative to reaching agreements or resolutions. So when we feel it makes the most sense, we'll go ahead and do it. But the fact that it's right before training camp, I don't think there's anything. I wouldn't read too much into that. I think that's just the kind of the end point on it.
Nick, as you look at the quarterback position, how are you feeling about the quarterback room, including C.J. Stroud and his first months?
Yeah, I think at this point we're just evaluating the whole team, so we're not going to put too much emphasis on one position. Again, like I said from the beginning, everybody has to reestablish a level of performance, and the players are ultimately going to determine who plays how big a role that they have. So take it one day at a time, try to focus on individual improvement, and I think, and we've talked about this as a team, it's about incremental improvement, it's about individual incremental improvement, which leads to collective improvement, which hopefully leads to team improvement. So that's where we are. I'm not going to get really too much further ahead than that.
What is some of your evaluation process when you go into looking at these players in training camp or putting them on the roster?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, Sarge. I would say, look, anybody's probably going to be able to go out there and put together like one good day of practice. You guys will comment on the highlight reel plays, who did one practice, this guy made this catch, this guy did this. Really what you're looking for is consistency and longevity over the course of a long period of time. And then you combine what they do at the field and what goes on in the classroom. Can they actually take the concepts that they're teaching, that they're learning? Can they apply them on the field? Can they make the correction? And can they do that over the course of, I would say, extended periods of time? So that's what we're trying to evaluate. We know we're going to have to make some hard decisions. It's about getting the right players on the team, and really it's about getting the right players on the bus and on campus. So we've talked about this extensively. It's 53, but it's really more than that. So try to get the right people in the building, try to get the right people on campus. We're going to have to carry some people on a roster. We're going to have to carry some people on a practice squad. There's going to be a lot of movement. Omar unfortunately brought this to my attention, I think, in the spring. We've had more transactions over the last, 2-3 years than any team in the league. So we're just trying to do what we think is best for the team, and I'm sure we'll continue that and try to get to an end point that we feel comfortable with. And there's going to be some hard decisions that we have to make, but hopefully we just make the right decisions and just utilize the information that we obtain on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, can you talk about?
Go ahead, Ken.
You said it's 20 days of practice, 3 games. What do you want to see? Are there stages along the way in terms of how you want to do that?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. If you look at the way our practices are structured, it's kind of 3 on, 1 off, so it's kind of almost in blocks. So we kind of have this pre-block before we play New England. So 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. We'll have 3 practices, and we play New England, down level block, and then the following week will be, I'd say, it's a different set of circumstances and challenge relative to the Dolphins and the joint practice. So it's another opportunity. So really today, tomorrow, and Friday will be very similar to the spring relative to wearing helmets and shorts and spiders, kind of ramping up and kind of getting the players, I would say, physically and mentally ready and acclimated to, I would say, the climate and the environment. Okay, so really you're kind of looking at it in sort of 2-week blocks or 2-week increments, and then as we go through the course of the summer here, we'll have a better idea. I'd say the game will be another, let's say, evaluation tool that we'll use. I think the joint practices are really going to be a good evaluation tool. I would say what a lot of teams have done throughout the league, sometimes your most competitive snaps and most competitive reps occur during the course of the week. Maybe you handle the game a little bit differently. So ultimately we'll decide how we want to structure things, but it's really kind of, don't get too far ahead of yourself. It's really kind of one day at a time, looking at it in blocks, kind of 7 to 10 day windows or blocks. And then once we kind of get through one period, all right, what's the challenge in front of us the next week? How do we handle it? What do we need to do? What modifications and adjustments do we have to make? Probably going to lose some players along the way. That's just the nature of this, unfortunately. So we're going to have to be, bob and weave here a little bit, adapt and adjust, be flexible, be open-minded, and ultimately just try to put a foundation in place that we can resort back to, because all good football plays start with good fundamentals. So take scheme out of it. Take any of that nonsense. This scheme, you can draw it up as good as you want. But in the end, can you run? Can you block? Can you tackle? Can you play the ball? Can you play with good body position? those are the things that we're going to focus on, that we're going to emphasize with our players, which D'Amico has been steadfast from the beginning about that, and we talk about that extensively in our team meetings. So really that's where the focus ultimately is going to be.
Nick, how about the strength of this roster as compared to the last couple of years? How much better do you feel than
I understand the question. Honestly, I have no idea. Hopefully we've put together a competitive group, and ultimately the players are going to determine how competitive or how good it is or isn't. We've invested resources and allocated resources in certain positions, but in the end, it's trying to put together as comprehensive a team as possible and trying to build the depth. Your bottom of the roster, kind of middle of the roster, we feel is important as the top end of the roster. So how are we 1 through 53, and then in conjunction with that, sort of your depth off the roster, 53 to 70, like all those players are important. So whoever's in the building, whoever's going to end up on a team, who's going to end up in the building in some capacity, ultimately is going to have an important role on our team. So I think we'll have a better idea. Going against teams like Miami, who playoff team, going against a team like New Orleans, who we have a lot of respect for their program, I think we'll have a decent idea of maybe where we are. I'd say at this point it's probably hard to speculate. Hopefully we've improved, but ultimately the proof is in the pudding, and we'll get a better idea here once we get into training camp and get a little bit deeper.
on those joint practices? How important was it to get those on for your process of Nico's? Does it affect how you would make decisions with the roster and keeping the training camp since you haven't had it in the past?
Yeah, not necessarily, Brooks, but it's just a different sort of evaluation tool. So we'll spend the next however many practices and days working against our personnel. So when you go against another team, you're working against a different group of players. So work against Jalen Phillips, work against, Christian Wilkins, work against Bradley Chubb. We're going to work against Howard and Ramsey. So those players might be a little bit different than what we see from our players. And ultimately, this league, it's a week-to-week matchup game. Who you're playing, understanding the personnel, understand the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent, and then what you can do as a player to try to exploit those things. So I'd say those are the benefits of that. I think you want to find the right team and the right staff to work with. So, Mike and D'Amico obviously have a relationship and got a good relationship with kind of Miami and their program overall. New Orleans, I'd say, a lot of respect for Dennis and kind of what they do down there. So it'll just be another evaluation tool that we can incorporate, and it gives the opportunity, honestly, not only to evaluate your players, but to evaluate their players as well. Been a part of those situations where we've actually either acquired a player, traded for a player, signed a player off of waivers because of an interaction that we had with that team, because you're actually able to maybe learn something about that player that you wouldn't otherwise know. So there's always benefits to everything you do. It's all about your mindset, and it's all about what you feel you can get out of it. So we'll try to maximize our opportunities each day, whatever we're doing. We're excited about the chance to work with those teams when we get to that point.
Hey, Nick, it's always hot here, obviously, but with record temperatures across the country, is there anything different or extra y'all are doing to make sure everybody's okay during practice?
Sure, you heighten the awareness. You try to educate your players as much as possible. I think we have a cool tent or this device over here around the corner in between practice. Try to give the players the opportunity to reduce their body temperature. So honestly, something as simple as the clothing that you wear outside. A lot of guys want to wear hoodies, sweatpants because they want to sweat. Okay, that's not a problem here in Houston, right? But you don't allow your body to sweat and that heat to leave your body. You could potentially be putting yourself at risk. So I think the big thing is the education. Here's a reason why. Here's some resources or tools that we can provide to you. The players are receptive to that. I'd say our sports performance team, specifically Ladd and the wellness team, do a great job of articulating that message and providing the players with what they need. So try to make smart decisions. The health and safety of the players is the most important thing for our team and our organization. So whatever we can do to help the players in that respect, that's the most important thing. So it's going to be hot, wherever you go, but you want to be smart. We're practicing in the morning, probably for a reason. It probably makes more sense. Still get a lot of work done. Still going to be out there. We're going to play games midday, but I don't know, 10 of them, 8, 9, 10 of them are going to be on closed doors. But still, you want to, at some point, you have to be out in the elements, but you want to make sure the players are mentally and physically prepared. The recovery is a big part of that as well, so educating them on the recovery. Here are the things that you can do, what you put into your body. I know nobody wants to hear, another nutrition analysis from me, but what you put into your body matters. So all those things, when you stack them up, that's what we can do to help the players and make sure they're physically and mentally prepared for the rigors of what they're going to go through out here. Go ahead, Landry.
With the new offensive system, I know it's new to you, it's new to the players. Is there like a learning process for you or anything like that, or do you lean on anyone? How does that work for you?
You say me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
Sure.
You're evaluating the guys, and it's different system for you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think what you try to do is just understand the core elements of it. What are the things we're trying to emphasize? In the end, there's only so many things you can do relative to how many runs you have, what's a design to run. I think understanding the intent and the integrity of the play, what's the responsibility of the players on those plays, what are they being coached to do, so that when we're going through it, kind of have an understanding. Because I think sometimes you always jump to conclusions, something happens, and it's like, oh man, this player is, you know. So from my perspective, I've enjoyed it, just learning. I think I like to learn and, you know, invest time and effort into understanding what's happening. It's going to help me personally. It's going to help, I would say, hopefully our entire group. So kind of always viewed my position in the bridge between kind of personnel scouting and the coaching staff. So the more I'm well versed in some of the things that we're doing, I'm not calling plays. It's not what we're talking about. But if you have an understanding of the intent and the integrity of the play, what we're trying to do, what happened on the play, then you can see, okay, is that something that we've talked to the player about? Is he an error repeater? Is that something that continually shows up? So that's, I'd say, becomes a part of the evaluation. So I've enjoyed it. You know, it's been a productive system. It's been a productive offense. There's elements and roots of it kind of throughout the course of the league. Maybe it's a little bit different than the system that I grew up in relative to New England. But, you know, I've certainly embraced the opportunity to learn something new. And you're always trying to find ways to improve and get better. So, I mean, hopefully it's, you know, can use that to my advantage here and just to my overall football evolution and development.
Logistically,
Go ahead, Landry. Go one more.
Logistically, is it like a thing where you need Bobby needs to call plays in preseason? Like, is preseason important because of logistics for a first?
Yeah, the preseason is a good test for all of us. So I'd say a lot of position coaches, you know, D'Amico was in that situation, going from position coach to play caller. I mean, preseason, even practices, right? You're out there with the headsets, getting the information to the players, calling plays. How do you react to certain situations? And a lot of that, candidly, you're going to learn on the fly. So a lot of us, when we're put in positions, are learning things for the first time. So that's part of growing and learning. That's part of a process for sure. Absolutely.
Did Stephen Nelson reported to camp?
Go ahead, Sean. Yeah.
Stephen Nelson reported to camp?
Yeah, everybody's reported. Everybody's here. Everybody's ready to go and in practice. So, you know, I'm not really going to comment on the discussions that we've had. We've had constructive dialogue with Stephen. You know, respect Stephen. I know he doesn't like my wardrobe selection, but I mean, that's okay. So, but, you know, Stephen's here. He's ready to go. You know, so we'll see how it goes here in training camp.
Have there been discussions at all do you know what might have prompted that sort of response from them?
I'm not really going to comment on anything. I think a lot of these times, sometimes it's best just to have a one-on-one discussion and dialogue and conversation. Anything better handled face-to-face. So, you know, Steve's been in this league for a long time. He's been a good player. So, you know, D'Amico and I have maintained constructive discussions with him and his representatives. So just kind of take it one day at a time and see how it goes.
Hey, Nick, you spent several months
Go ahead,
on
yep.
the job with D'Amico being here leading up to this day. What have you learned at this point about him in the head coaching role that's really stands out?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been effusive in my kind of, you know, praise of him, and it's well deserved. I think his consistency day to day, his attitude, how he approaches it, how he articulates and messages the team, and frankly, we kind of lean on one another. You know, and I've mentioned this. I may have mentioned this a little bit in the spring. There are some things that, you know, are strengths of his, some of that are strengths of mine. I have blind spots. We all have blind spots. So we can hopefully work collectively together on getting to a resolution on some of those areas. But, I mean, we talk regularly. We talk every day. He's receptive to ideas. You know, hey, what about this? And it's very reciprocal. So, I mean, you know, I've loved every minute of the opportunity to work with him. And I think those of you that have been around him from his time as a player throughout the course of his career, his time as a coordinator, I mean, that's who he is. I mean, who he is externally is the same person he is internally in the building, and he's consistent. So I think anytime you're around people, you're just looking for consistency day to day in what they provide, and are they really who they are, and that's absolutely been the case. So definitely excited about the opportunity to have in front of us. Look, it's not going to be perfect. We understand that. We're going to run into some bumps in the road. We're going to run into some situations where we're going to have to deal with. But, you know, I think we can be open and constructive with those dialogue and kind of work together. In the end, and we've talked about this at different points, D'Amico's commented on it, I've commented about it, it's collaborative effort in this program, this team. It's not about one person. It's not about one individual. It's about all of us kind of doing our part. Everybody's got an important job. No job is more important than the other. That's how we approach and that's how we look at it. And we articulate that message throughout the course of the organization. And I think we have to represent that and do that and back that up. So, excited about where we are. A lot of work in front of us. Kind of take it one day at a time and embrace the opportunities that we have here.
You're going through a couple of off seasons here. Have you got different interaction with fans or people around town this particular summer? That, have you gotten a sense of the positivity that wasn't there?
My trips to the grocery store have been about the same over the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, I love going to the grocery store. I know people probably think I'm a nut, but no, the fans have been great. I mean, honest to God, look, it hadn't been easy. We've had to deal with some things, but I mean, that's part of life. I mean, you're going to deal with some trials and tribulations, but candidly, just have the right attitude, have the right approach. I appreciate the fan. Honestly, they've been really supportive every step of the way. I'm pretty low profile, try to keep to myself. I mean, those of you that have been around me, that's kind of who I am. But it's always nice to hear the support that we have, that they appreciate what we're trying to do. They kind of see the fruits of some of our labor. I try not to get too high, too low, but it's always nice to hear, that they appreciate what we're doing. I think the city has a hunger and appetite for winning, because in the end, that's what everybody wants. They just want to have a team that they can be proud of, that they can root for. Candidly, we haven't really probably given them enough to feel that way. It doesn't mean that we've solved the world's problem to this point, but it's a great city. It's a great sports town. I know everybody was panicking when the Astros were 6 out. Now they are almost in first place. So this is the arc and evolution of sport. There's going to be ups and downs, but appreciate the fans, appreciate the support that they've shown, and excited about where we are. Go ahead.
You got added executive vice president. How does maybe your job duties change a little bit or added to?
Yeah, not necessarily. Again, I've kind of always taken the approach of whatever we need to do to help the organization to move it forward, and whatever I'm asked to do, however big or small that job is. So, got a lot of great people around me. We have a lot of great people in this building. So, I mean, nothing has really substantively changed for me. So, try to come in with the right attitude, the right mindset. Try to work out every day. Try to do what we feel is best for the organization on a day-to-day basis. Appreciate the opportunity ownership has provided to myself and D'Amico and the rest of our staff. So. Nothing's really changed on this end.
Nick, through OTAs, you and D'Amico told us that coming into training camp there will be a competition at the quarterback position. But how important was it to have, by locking up Titus Howard, to have that good offensive line around a rookie who will be taking some snaps this season?
Yeah, I mean, team building is just about trying to get the right people in the building that you feel can help your team. So wherever that comes from. So every player is important. Everybody has a job to do. Everybody has a responsibility. No one else can do it for them. So I think the good thing is everybody's here. Everybody's ready to work. In the end, that's the most important thing, Sarge. The rest of it, is just a bunch of fluff, and, it's kind of on the, outside noise. So, our players are here. They got the right mindset. They got the right attitude. They understand it's going to be about work. Nothing's going to be given to them. It's all going to be earned, and that's the right mindset that they should have here walking in the door. Go ahead, John.
As an evaluator, do you prefer inter-squad practices over preseason games, and are you a self-checkout guy?
I'll start with the second one first. Self-checkout guy. Even if I have a full cart, I might go through the self-checkout. So I'm one of those person they're probably looking at me going, "This guy's got a full cart." But my oldest daughter is unfortunately a lot like her father, and she likes going through. They help through the checkout. So self-checkout preference, but we'll definitely go through the normal checkout process. The first part of the question, I think, John, it really depends on where your team is maybe in their arc a little bit. So, again, each year is a little bit different. Just try to do what you feel makes the most sense. I would say there's some players that have been here over the last couple of years. We've just kind of worked with ourselves. I've been a part of teams where there's been periods we haven't done it, and then we kind of do it 3, 4, 5 years in a row. So, again, there's no set formula. I do think it adds a little bit of oomph and a little bit of juice. And the players maybe have a heightened sense of competition because you want to compete and you want to work against good players and kind of see where maybe you stack up relative to other players. So I think relative to this team and our situation, we felt it made a lot of sense. D'Amico was all for it. We talked about it in kind of February, March. It was just something we had the opportunity to do, and it happened to come to fruition and work out the way that it did.
If organizations could make as much money on inter-squad practices Do you think there will come a day when that replaces preseason?
A possibility, John. Again, anything's possible. Again, I think really a lot of those practices too about fan engagement too. So I think I was talking to some of our folks the other day. You know, we've opened up the practices. We have 8 open practices, and they're sold out. So again, to bring eyeballs to the sport, and really in the end, the sport, you know, the fans are a big part of it. So if there's things that we can do to enhance a fan experience, then certainly something we're going to look at.
We'll
So.
close with Brooks, DJ, and Stephanie.
Brooks, DJ, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Okay.
We talked about John Metchie's return, wide receiver.
All right.
How do you view that position, and you know, working through training camp, and potentially you've done a lot in the offensive line. What's been kind of your view of where that depth is, and how important he is, and that if he might add, if maybe that doesn't work out towards week 1 for him?
Yeah. As you know, Brooks will always kind of look at everything. We'll kind of have a heightened awareness of what's going on in the league. There's an opportunity to add a player that we feel makes sense on a lot of different levels. It's not sometimes just cookie cutter, drop name into a hat, and then just add him to the roster. So there's a lot of components that go into it. We have players with varying levels of skill and experience, and I would say skill sets overall. So kind of be an interesting group to kind of evaluate as we go. And if there's an opportunity that we feel makes sense to add to that group, then we'll look at it. If there's not, then we'll grow with the group that we have. But we're confident in the group that is here right now, and then we'll evaluate as we go. DJ, yep, and then Steph.
You extended 3 offensive linemen throughout the offseason. Obviously, Nick Tusk was one of them. What's the difference between negotiating with a player versus negotiating with an agent?
No different. You kind of negotiations. There's going to be give and take on both sides. So a team and a club are going to have their position. The individual and the agent representation are going to have their position. What you're trying to do is kind of thread the needle, kind of find a happy medium. You never want to walk away from a negotiation, where somebody leaves pissed off. So, it doesn't really accomplish anything. So you just try to be honest and open and have candid discussions and be respectful of their viewpoint. Hopefully they're respectful of their viewpoint, of our viewpoint, and then we can arrive at a point that everybody's comfortable with. Then, we can agree, or if we agree to disagree and it doesn't work out, then we just move on to the next. There's never hard feelings. You can never take it personal. I would say one of the things that we have to do, that I have to do, is when you negotiate with an agent, there's probably a good chance somewhere down the road you're going to have to deal with him again. They're going to have another player, another good player. So, if it was confrontational or left with a bad taste in your mouth, okay, then they're going to remember that, right? So I'd say my personality really isn't that way. Try to be fair, try to be reasonable, and just try to be consistent. I think, they usually appreciate that. So try to take the same approach. Doesn't necessarily change that, but, you just kind of want to be able to hear both sides. And, it's it's a personal interaction, a human dialogue. So there's a human element, so you can't lose sight of that. So, Stephanie.
You've been in the league long enough that you've seen different seasons and different amount of preseason games. What are the specific challenges from your perspective of how do you get the team together for 17 games and hopefully beyond from your perspective?
Yeah, that's the hardest part. I think you've kind of seen an evolution over the last 2 to 3 years. Less starters play in the preseason. So I think what's your philosophy? What do you think is best for your team to kind of get them ready to go for the first week? And really, we've talked about this at different points. The season, you kind of break it up into quarters, right? So you kind of have weeks 1 through 4. All right, you got to know what you need to do to that point, and then 5 through 8. All right, and by that point, you probably have a decent idea of where you are. Hopefully, you're not too far out of the mix, so you're within striking distance of being competitive later in the year. So I think you just have to be ready to adapt, and you have to look at your team and say, what do we need? What's the best thing for us? And understand where your team is week 1 is probably going to be a lot different where they are week 10, 11, 12. So the focus is on, let's get ready for week 1. Let's focus on training camp. Let's kind of get ready for preseason game 1, New England. All right, then get on to Miami. Okay, get through New Orleans, and then we have that window there. And ultimately, you got to get your team ready for week 1. And just give the players the best chance, put them in the best position where they have an opportunity to go out there and be competitive. And then still, the evaluation process doesn't stop just after, okay, here's our team, week 1, ready to play Baltimore. Good chance week 1, what the team looks like and how it's constructed is going to be a lot different towards the end of the year. So I think there's always challenges every year. I think if you have the right mindset and embrace those challenges and just try to be proactive and productive with your opportunities, that's all you can really ask.
Is there a special challenge with new schemes and new staff?
There always is, because you know maybe less about that team, but there's probably a good chance they have a track record. So just as an example with Baltimore, right? New offensive coordinator, Coach Monken, so you're probably going to have to go back and look at some of the things they did in Georgia, because they're probably going to do much in the preseason, let alone if Lamar even plays, right? But you're going to have to prepare for some things. So I think week one, there's probably the most unknowns. So then it kind of starts to reveal itself a little bit. But everybody's going to kind of have a core, solid foundation of what they're going to do. And then you're learning and adjusting and adapting as you go.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.